Okay, so this is my acrylic wash tutorial, and I will be honest, this is just a technique that I came up with that worked with me. I'm sure many other artists before me have used it, and maybe there's a more technical term of sorts or an even more technical way to do it. But I just came up with a way that worked for me, which I feel many artists should do, is learn from others, explore, experiment, and then do what works for you. There are a lot of rights, but not a lot of wrongs. So I really feel like we can create things that work well for our art and what our heart is desiring to create. So this is a larger piece that I am currently working on. It is a watercolor mixed media on birchwood. So it's going to be similar if you're looking at my other tutorial with the wood rounds, very similar wood. I want to go ahead and approach my Luna moth here, which I did a really rough block in with watercolor. You don't need to do this. This is just because it's a large scale painting and I blocked it in for me. So we are going to do an acrylic wash over this. So I'm going to use my acrylic paint. This one is a heavy body acrylic paint, which means it's a bit thicker. You can use that, or you can use a soft body or a student grade paint. That is totally fine. I'm putting a little bit in my palette here for that green. I'm going to go ahead and use a slightly darker green, so I have some variable of light and dark tones. This is a hooker's green, which I absolutely love. And this one is a soft body. As you can see, I'm just really not too partial. I just kind of work fluid with what feels good to me in the moment. I'm going to do a little bit of white. So some people might actually want some measurements. You might work good in that way, as far as 2 tablespoons of this and 1/4 of that. Unfortunately, you're not going to get that from me. I apologize. But I like to just create in the moment and create a wash that just works well for the wood and how it's going to absorb and how much opaqueness or translucency that I want. So I do have clean water here. As if I'm about to do a watercolor, I like to go ahead and dip my brush in there. And if you notice on my palette, I will just kind of work the edge of that paint. So an acrylic wash is just thinning out your acrylic paint to almost like a even softer serve ice cream, like it's melted, but even thinner than that, like a watered down milkshake maybe. So the reason I would use an acrylic wash is to have a little more cover, opaqueness than the translucency of a watercolor. Sometimes I would choose an acrylic wash so that it would give me a lot more color, an efficient amount of time, or coverage, I apologize, a lot more coverage and an efficient amount of time, especially with some of my larger scale pieces. So I just did a little bit of water, a little bit of paint, and I'm going to go ahead and apply it to the wood. So as you can see, it has a slightly thicker coverage, more opaque coverage than the actual watercolor that was there initially. You could keep going back into it, but as you start creeping into your acrylic paint, it's going to get thicker. So you can dip slightly back into the water, come back over here, and use your acrylic wash again. And as you can see, it does give really, really, really nice coverage without losing the beauty of that grain in the wood that if you'll notice in most of my pieces, that's what I try to accentuate and work in or work with. Now, what's fun about the acrylic wash is it allows the acrylic to not dry so quickly, but it's still going to dry quickly because it's acrylic and it's watered down, really similar to watercolor, but with the wood, it takes just a tiny bit longer. So if you want to do any kind of layering, and if you notice, I did not water down that white. I just went ahead and layered right on top. I just dipped it in. I didn't even wash my brush. And the white naturally is going to give you a bit more coverage as well. But because you already had a layer of that acrylic wash, it's still translucent enough. If you prefer, you can put a little water in an empty palette cup via your brush or any other tool, and then you can take some paint and do a pre-mix. That is a nice way to do it if you definitely want to have consistency. You could do that as well. Again, I love to just kind of work in the moment. I'm not much of a pre-planner, even with my paintings. So with my mixing, I really am just mixing with whatever I'm feeling at the moment. But for some people who really love that consistent paint, who love that plan, I do suggest just drops of water with some drops of paint. And ta-da, you have a nice acrylic wash. And you can always thicken it up as you use it if you need to. And what I love working with this and on wood is I can continually work in layers. And as long as I'm not oversaturating the wood at any given time, I'm not going to disturb that beautiful texture of the wood. So like if you get it a little bit too moist, too much wetness overall, where it's almost as if it's been soaking in water, that wood will begin to burr out and become rough. And it's actually really difficult to sand out. I've made that mistake in the beginning when I was really experimenting with the watercolor on wood. But if you're just doing it with these little bits of controlled layers, you won't have that problem. It's a lot of fun to work on. You can blend paints really easy, especially if you love working in watercolor or acrylic. There we go. So that is my quick acrylic wash tutorial. Thanks for checking in, guys. Bye.